Now, in my talk today, I will provide you all an overview of our efforts to understand the structure of the Indus writing. So let us begin by taking a look at the various objects on which the Indus script is found to be inscribed. So on the top left, we have some seals and sealings. So 80% of the writing appears on these kind of square and rectangular seals and sealings. So here you can see a string of signs at the top part of this square seal. This is the unicorn, the most frequently depicted animal motif on the in the seals, and this is a unique standard near its face, about which also several theories exist. Now, if we also have evidence of other animals such as elephant, tiger, bull, etc., which are depicted on these seals. And generally, when the animal is not a unicorn, we find different kinds of feeding troughs near the face of the animal. Then about 10% of the writing appears on these kind of miniature tablets. These are very small objects. Another 5% of the inscribed material appears in the form of copper tablets, and they have their style of their own. So here, instead of finding the writing and the animal motif on the same side, we have the writing on one side and the animal motif and the feeding trough on the other side. We also find the Indus writing on these kind of pottery shreds as impressions on these kind of small drinking cups maybe, and even on bronze implements and several other material like bangles at times, and some these kind of ivory sticks and so on. Even clay impressions of the seals have been found on the clay text. Mostly they were found at the site of Lothal. So the presence of these Indus signs on these various different kinds of objects does suggest that the Indus writing may have been used to write a variety of contents. Now, if we take a look at the various components of Indus seals, we find that most often on an inscribed surface or on an Indus seal, we find the script, animal motif, and a standard or the feeding trough, and together they account for the bulk of the inscribed corpus. However, we also have evidence of other interesting components which are listed over here, and they include narrative scenes which could be depicting their myths or fables. We find evidence of human figures. We also find composites of human and animal motifs. We also find at times plant motifs depicted on these inscribed surfaces. We have several mythical figures, composite animals, multi-headed animals where the different heads of different animals are joined to the same body of an animal. And we also have some inscribed material which comes in the form of geometric patterns and abstract patterns. So, though the individual contribution of these components is not much in comparison to script, animal motif, and the manger, it is these components that do provide us a peep into the beliefs or ideology of Indus people. But I'll not be discussing these components today. Rather, we will be focusing our discussion mostly on this string of signs which comprise the Indus writing. And if we collect these texts from different objects, we end up with a corpus, and we use that corpus for our analysis of the structure of the Indus writing. Now, the question arises is, what did they write? We do not know actually, and we are trying to figure it out. But if we consider the role of writing in ancient societies, we find that ancient people used their writing system for very different purposes, such as to store records, to keep a track of time, to facilitate communication over long and short distances, and even at times to express superiority and power. However, the ambiguity associated with the context and usage of Indus writing system has made the problem of Indus script even more challenging. And what adds to the challenge are the following things. The text on the Indus seals are very short and brief. The average number of signs in an Indus text is just 5. The longest single line text consists of just 14 signs, and then there are two examples of two objects which have text of 14 signs. And then the longest text consists of 26 signs, and this also runs into three distinct lines. Secondly, we do not know what language or languages the Indus people used to speak. And finally, the lack of bilingual or multilingual text adds to the problem of decipherment. So, in spite of this, scholars have been trying to read the Indus script with no clear answer. Some of the various attempts so far include uh, Dr. Mahadevan's work, which led to the publication of the first concordance in 1977 and from TIFR. And then there was the work by Dr. Prapola and his team, his Finnish team, as well as the Russian team led by Professor Norozov. Both of them found association of the Indus science or Indus script to Dravidian languages. Then Professor B.V. Subbariappa, on the other hand, tried to interpret the script as entirely as numeric. He thought that the signs represent numbers. S.R. Rao and several other scholars tried to read Vedic literature in the Indus text. And Possehl, in his book Indus Age, the Writing System, has reviewed 36 different attempts by various researchers and it is worth looking into for any person who is interested in knowing what all interpretations have been made regarding the content of the Indus script by various scientists or various people. However, the bottom line is the sign system of Indus culture remains ambiguous with contested claims of decipherment, but no consensus on any of them. So we decided to start afresh. And this is how we define our approach. We made no assumptions about the nature, content, or purpose of the undeciphered Indus script. We use techniques developed in the field of computer science that can probe specific aspects of various types of data. The objective of our study is to identify the structure and nature of a collection of written material, especially when the background knowledge is not enough. And the present approach can be used to identify the syntactic framework for the Indus script, which can then be used to evaluate various claims of decipherment. So we use Mahadevan's concordance in our most of our studies, and this is how the sign list of Mahadevan looks like. In the sign list of Mahadevan, there are about 417 signs, and this is 1/4 of the sign list. So you can see sign number 1 to sign number 110 shown over here. So if we take a closer look at the design of the Indus signs over here, you can see that sign number 1 to sign number 48 look like various forms of human stick figures. Then we have a series of signs which look like fish, crab, birds can be seen, and so on. Then there are a series of signs which are like strokes, and you may associate it to numbers, but they may have served any other function as well in the script. Now, the signs themselves vary in their complexity. And to show you an example, if you take a look at the sign number 32, it seems to be a compound sign made of sign number 1 and another sign 328 in the sign list. Then at times the signs vary with each other by the presence or absence of certain strokes. So for example, this is sign number 59 is different from sign number 65, as there is a small hat on the top of sign number 65 and so on. We'll discuss certain issues related to the design of Indus signs in my later part of the lecture today. But coming back to the writing and especially the direction of Indus writing, let us see what we can say. Now, this is one aspect over which there is some agreement and some consensus among scholars, and it is believed to be right to left. Now, what are the various factors which led to this conclusion are given below. So, at times, when we go from right side to the left side uh, on an on the inscribed on an inscribed surface of in the seal, we find that this signs start shrinking. Okay, so this shows that due to lack of space, these are squeezed over here. And then we have examples of this kind of objects where we find overflow of signs from going from the first row to the second row. So this is the most frequent ender. Actually, this sign is the most frequent ender, and here due to lack of space, it is shown. It is written over here. Then we find examples of this kind of writing where there is a gap towards the right hand side. So writing starts like here, then this character signs get tilted, and then it goes from here, and this is again a very frequent text ender, and then here they again get tilted, and we again find a very frequent text ender here. So all these and some other factors does suggest that the writing seems to have right to left direction, though there are a few exceptions in the corpus too. Now, this is how a page from the Mahadevan's dataset looks like. Now, you can see each text here is identified by a 4-digit number. Okay, so when we work with the strings, we work actually with the corresponding string of numbers. So this is the sign number 342 over here, and this edge, this is the very common beginner, the sign number 267, and the other signs are also marked by the corresponding numbers. And at times you can see there are certain asterisk marks over here on some of the signs. So these are the texts coming from some of the damaged objects. So the person at the Dr. Mahadevan was quite doubtful about this reading, so he has put this asterisk mark, and I'll show you how by creating a model of the industry we try to confirm the readings which were doubtful in the database. Okay, so when we started our study, we first of all looked at the sign frequency distribution. And I have already told you in Mahadevan's database, there are 417 signs. And this is how the sign frequency distribution looks like. So if we take a look at the frequency distribution of the 417 signs, we find that just 67 signs out of 417 signs account for about 80% of the writing. That is very limited number of signs actually account for bulk of the writing, and there are large number of rarely used signs. So this trend is captured very well by the Zipf-Mandelbrot law. So the sign frequency distribution of the index script seems to follow the Zipf-Mandelbrot law. So which shows that the high ranked signs are used very frequently, and there is a long tail of very rarely used signs. Even natural language seems to follow this empirical law. However, we cannot, just because this sign frequency distribution law, frequency distribution of index script follows this law, we cannot conclude that it's a language, because even city size distribution seems to follow this law, and several other systems, physical systems also seem to follow this law. However, this association was quite interesting. Now, if we take a look at the usage pattern of the text beginners and text enders in the index writing, we find that at most often certain signs seem to appear quite frequently at the beginning position. So this is the most frequent text beginner in index text, and there are certain signs which very often tend to appear at the end of the index text. So this is the most frequently appearing text ender. However, within this also we found some interesting differences between the usage of text beginners and text enders. We found that very limited number of signs are allowed at the text ending position. However, at the text beginning position, large number of signs can appear. So this can be quantified using this cumulative frequency distribution plot of beginners and enders. And here we find an asymmetry in the usage of text beginners and text enders. So you can see three curves over here. Okay, one is the green curve, one is the blue curve, and one is the red curve. Okay, and the number of signs is shown on the x-axis, and the cumulative fraction is shown on the y-axis. Now the red curve is for all the signs. So, and we have already seen that just 67 signs are enough to account for 80% of all the writing. So what about this how many signs are required to account for 80% of all text enters, and we find that just 20 signs are enough to account for all the text enters in the index writing, whereas we need to have about 80 signs to account for 80% of all text beginners. Okay, so there is more flexibility in using a sign as a text beginner rather than a text ender, and this asymmetry also provides some initial clues about the presence of logic and structure in the writing. So far we have been looking at individual signs, but what about correlation between signs which exist in the same text? So the first question we wanted to answer was, are index texts just a collection of randomly ordered signs, or is there any sequencing? And in order to check this, we performed this test. What we did was we shuffled all the signs in the written text and checked how often we get similar sequences by chance in comparison to the real index data. And it was found that sign sequences of size 2, 3, or 4, that is, there were certain sign pairs, triplets, and quadruplets in the index text that were appearing far more frequently than what we can expect just by chance. So the immediate question was, all right, if there are these kind of frequent sequences of frequent pairs, triplets, and quadruplets occurring in the index text, where do they actually occur in the placed in the index text? So that brought us to the next level of the analysis, where we analyze the positional distribution of these frequent sign sequences. And this slide shows you the results of the positional distribution pattern of sign pairs. Now, this is the most frequent pair in the index, in the corpus of the index writing, that is 267 followed by sign number 99. And 85% of its total occurrences, it appears at the beginning of the text. Then if we take a look at the other frequent pair, this uh, 336 followed by 89, 336, 89, this pair most often appears at the 89% of the times appears in the middle of the text. And again, this pair has a favorite location at the end of the text. So 96% of the times it seems to appear to end the text. Now, this trend was not only true for sign pairs, this trend was also true for sign triplets and quadruplets. So the frequent sign sequences in the index text had, we conclude that they have a preferred location in the index text. Now, as I already told you, the length of the index text varies from 1 to 14 signs, and it is possible to segment longer index text into these smaller units. And we can actually perform the segmentation of the index text in various ways. I'll show you one example over here. So we can just compare the text coming from different objects. So this is a very long text which we would like to segment, and we go through the corpus and we'll see if the components of this text appear on any other objects or not. So we found we can find this kind of these components appearing on these three different objects. So this appears on this object, which is identified by this 4-digit. This triplet again appeared on another object, and this quadruplet appeared on the object, and so we can just segment it like this. We can also segment the longer index text by comparing the adjacent pair frequencies. So we can just compare the frequency of these two, the frequency of occurrence of this pair with this pair, and we can find weaker and stronger junctions in the index text. And it is also possible to segment that index text in that way. So we actually devised a segmentation algorithm to segment the longer index text of size 5 or more, and it was found that about 88% of the index text of size greater than 5 could be segmented into these smaller units. So we then employed the current day machine learning tools and techniques to study the data of a index writing, and I'll be showing you the results of that study to you in the coming few slides. So what we specifically used was the models which are called n-grams. Now, what are these n-grams? Okay, n-grams are probabilistic models which are generally used to model various types of sequences, and which provide a very useful method of exploring the correlation of signs in the sequences, and they can be used to analyze sequences. So for example, in computational linguistics, they can be used to analyze the structure of a sentence, structure of a word. So because the word is just a string of characters, and a sentence is a string of words. They can also be used to analyze protein sequences where the individual unit becomes the amino acids and so on. So we decided to use uh, this model to study the sequences of Indus signs. Now, these models are not sensitive to the semantic content of the sequences, but reveal their syntax and capture their syntax, if any. Now, the corpus of the Indus script was modeled with n-grams, starting with n is equal to 1 to n equal 5. And this n actually defines the range of correlation. Okay, so so we actually modeled the Indus script with the n-grams starting from 1 to 5. And it was found that the perplexity, and this is perplexity is nothing but the a measure of defining how good a model was found to reduce considerably when bigram correlations are taken into account. Now, what are these bigram correlation? If we just consider the correlation of a sign with its just preceding sign, that is called a bigram correlation. Okay, so it was found that just when we go from the individual signs to the to pairs, the perplexity of the model reduced considerably. Okay, and then it seems to saturate, and so that suggested that most of the correlations can be captured by the bigram model. And so we decided to study this bigram model in detail, and try to use this bigram model for various different applications. Okay, so once we had this bigram model of the Indus script, we can use it for various interesting applications, and these are listed over here. We can use it to establish and to that there is an underlying logic in the writing. We can find signs having similar syntactic function in the Indus text. So it is possible to identify certain signs having similar correlation with a group of signs using this model. We can also use this model to fill in damaged or illegible Indus text. So that is to restore the damaged Indus text. We can also this model to analyze variation in the writing from different sites or different regions. And we can also use this model to generate artificial Indus-like text. That is that the text which seems to have a grammar of the Indus writing, and it conforms to the pattern which is found in the Indus text. So I'll show you a few examples of some of these applications. So this is how we restore some of the damaged Indus text. Uh, as you can see, the text number is shown over here. The text having a doubtful sign are listed over here. So here, for example, in this text, this sign is a doubtfully read sign, and in this text, this sign is a doubtfully read sign, and so on. So how we go about restoring is, first of all, we just remove this sign from the text, and then we asked our model to make a prediction about this sign. And these are the most probable restoration. This is the restored text, and these are the options given over here. This is the most um, probable restoration, this is the next most probable restoration, and so on. So you can see that in most of the cases the predicted sign matches well with the reading. And it was found that our bigram model was able to restore the damaged text with about 75% accuracy. Now, we also find at times the certain seals in far away West Asian sites, and this is one such example. And there are a series of such texts in the corpus, but there was something interesting about these texts which were found at the West Asian sites. For example, here in this circular seal, you can see the pair 342, 342 is appearing twice. Okay, so this pair never occurs in the Indus corpus coming from the sites which are located in the Indus Valley region. However, this pair was occurring in the seal which was found at a First Station site. So we can actually calculate how likely it is to be generated by the model which we have created, and this is how we compare the writing from different regions. And so if we take a typical Indus text which seems to have follow the rules which the normal rules of Indus writing, that is having a text beginner at the beginning, text ender at the ending. So this is we end up with the likelihood of about this order. Now if we just alter the sequence, okay, so if we just bring this sign at the beginning, that is 342 at the beginning, and this 267 here, we find that the likelihood of this text being generated by the model which we have trained on the data drops to about 0. Now, what about the West Asian Sea? So we had this sequence over here, and you can see that the likelihood of this text being generated by the model, which was trained by us on the Indus writing corpus, is very low. Okay, what does it suggest? It suggests that the West Asian seal text is about 100,000 times unlikely to be generated by the learned model of the model as other Indus area texts. So the likelihood of it is very low. That means the grammar of it seems to be different. And why this could be, we propose, and it was also proposed by some of the earlier scholars, that there are sequences on the seals which were found in the West Asian sites, which are different from what we expect from the Indus seals. And this could be due to the use of Indus script to write West Asian content. So if we just use the Indus script, the Indus characters to write West Asian content, we'll end up with sequences which make no sense in the Indus writing. However, these may have be made perfect sense in the West Asian, to the West Asians, whatever content they had written using this. Okay, so all this suggests that there exists some logic in the Indus writing. There is presence of syntax in the writing, but does the script encode language? Now, in order to uh, address this question, we compared uh, the the interscript data with the various linguistic and non-linguistic systems. And I'll just show you the results of this study now. So what we actually compared was a mathematical quantity called conditional entropy of Indus science system with various linguistic and non-linguistic systems. Now, what is this conditional entropy? Conditional entropy is a mathematical quantity which quantifies the amount of flexibility in choosing a sign given a preceding sign. So if we have a sign A, how much flexibility do I have in choosing the next sign being B, C, D, etc.? Okay, so the study indicated that the conditional entropy of Indus script is relatively closer to linguistic systems and then non-linguistic systems. And this is the plot of this study. So here you can see the conditional entropy is depicted on the y-axis, and the number of tokens in the system is shown on the x-axis. There are two control systems. Okay, this top curve is for a very extremely flexible system. That means any sign can follow or precede this. Precede another sign in this system, and this is a very rigid system. That is, we have very limited flexibility. There is only one or two signs can follow a given sign. Now, this range is mostly taken up by the linguistic systems. This band is mostly taken up by the linguistic systems, and you can see even Indus, that is this curve seems to fall on this linguistic band. Okay, and there was another system that is here, the Fortran. We had this non-linguistic system in our study that seems to have a flexibility in between this natural languages and the very rigid system. Now, these are the various databases which were used for Indus. We had the Mahadevan corpus, we had English, Sanskrit, Old Tamil, all of them fell into this range. Sumerian also was here only. We had DNA, protein, and Fortran also, and so Fortran is over here. DNA and protein seems to have they were close to the random or very flexible system. Even music seems to follow somewhere here. So the conditional entropy of the Indus script was found to be close to the linguistic systems. All right. So we then resorted to some of the unsupervised machine learning techniques in order to identify clusters of Indus text which were having clusters of text having similar clusters of text which were quite similar to each other and were different from the other clusters. So what we can do is we can use the clustering techniques and the clustering techniques which are generally unsupervised machine learning techniques can be used to identify closely the texts which are having close affinity with each other, and we can use to identify those kind of clusters from the Indus corpus, and we used the k-means clustering to identify such clusters in the Indus text corpus, and we identified 9 clusters, and these clusters were such that the text in each of these clusters were more similar amongst each other than to the text belonging to other clusters. Now I'll show you the clusters over here. So if you just take a look at the texts which are listed in each of the cluster, you'll find that there are certain signs and sign groups which seem to form the signature of each of the clusters. So here, for example, this cluster has an affinity to this sign, okay, and then this sign. Cluster 2 seems to have affinity to this 245 and this 25 and so on. So each of these clusters seems to have an affinity to certain signs and sign sequences, and this seems to have been captured very well by these 9 clusters. However, we tried to correlate these clusters to the other background information such as site or object type, and no association was found between the clusters and the sites or the object types. So we proposed that these clusters seem to correspond to different styles or contents, so each of these texts may have been used to write some different kind of content. So this could be some different style of writing. So that is why we were finding the preferences of certain signs or sign groups in each of the cluster. All right. So now let us take a look at some of the studies we have done on the design of Indus signs. So here, what we exactly do is the following. So first of all, we identify the design elements of Indus signs. As we know, the Indus signs themselves vary in complexity. Some signs seems to be very simple, and some signs seem to be compounds of other simple signs, and some signs seems to be modified by certain strokes and so on. So what we did was we first of all identified the design elements of the Indus signs, and then using these design elements, we decomposed the composite signs or the compound signs. And then we specifically studied the usage pattern of the compound signs to check if they were created to save writing space or if they were having some other function in the writing. So these are the various design elements of Indus signs that we have identified. We classify them into 3. The first one is the basic signs, and we identified 154 basic signs. So you can see this is the simple this humanistic figure 1. This looks like fish, and so on. Now we had a category of provisional basic signs. Now what are these? We identified 10 such signs. So if we take a look at some of the designs of various science, we find certain components which seem to occur again and again, but these components do not have an independent occurrence in the sign list. So we identified them as the provisional basic signs, and 10 such inverted, this seems to be inverted e- uh, inverted box, inverted U kind of sign, and the other eight such components were identified. We also identified certain modifiers. I've already shown you an example of this hat in my earlier slide. So, for example, this four-stroke modifier appears on about 20 different signs. So, 21 such modifiers were found, and using these design elements, we revisited the sign list of Indus signs, and we can actually classify them in the following manner. So we have 417 signs, and out of which 154 are basic, and then there are 263 composite signs. Composite signs then again are classified into two categories: compound signs, which are simple merger of other simple basic signs, and modified signs, which have the presence of some other modifier also on the in their design. Okay, now we take a closer look at the usage pattern of compound signs, and I have already told you we wanted to check whether these compound signs were simple merger of the uh, uh, merger of the basic signs to create, which were created for saving space, or was there anything else going on over there. So in order to check this, what we can do, we can take a compound sign and we can just decompose it. So for example, this sign can be decomposed into two basic signs, and because there are two components, they can have you can have two possible combination. It can come, if it is A and B, it can come as AB or BA. So we have more complex signs where there can be three or four components, and so we have to look at all possible combinations. And how we compare the usage pattern of the compound sign with the usage pattern of the corresponding sequences, we just take a look at the usage pattern of this compound in all the text, and we see how what sign it precedes and follows, and we compare that with the usage pattern of these corresponding sequences to check if it can these sequence can replace this, any of these sequence can replace this compound sign or not. So what was found in the study is that in most of the cases, the constituent elements in any combination uh, do not seem to share identical environment with the compound signs. So the compound signs do not seem to be formed for saving space, that is for brevity. Rather, they seem to have some other function in the index text. All right. So far, we have been looking at the various structural studies, and which include the sign frequency distribution, how they were correlated with each other, what was the sign design, and so on. But these studies need to be associated with the background information, where other contextual information, in order to make complete sense of the data. So the various different contextual parameters can be site of occurrence. So we know that there were various different sites from which the data comes. So we can actually see how the usage pattern of individual signs varies with respect to different sites, different object types. What was the relation of the signs or text with the various patterns which are depicted on the in the seals, and we can also correlate it with various stratigraphical information to see if how the script was evolving, how the sequences, was there any change in the sequences with respect to time. And we can compare, if we have the data, the how the text from various regions which were found at various different location at the site vary with respect to each other. So all this is possible if we have we have proper contextual data regarding each of the texts which are cataloged in the corpus. And we did some study in this direction, and I'll show you some of the preliminary results of this study. So one of the characteristics of writing is localized variations based on specific needs of region or context. So we used hierarchical clustering to compare the usage of signs across various sites and types of object. Now, hierarchical clustering is a method of cluster analysis which seeks to build a hierarchy of clusters. Variation in the usage of signs coming from different object types and sites was studied using this method. And these are the plots. So here you can see the site is shown on the x-axis, and how close it is shown on the distance is shown on the y-axis with respect to the sign usage. So MD is Mohenjo-daro, L is Lothal, CH is Chanudaro, other Harappan site, Kalibangan, Harappa, West Asian sites. You can see that the text from Mohenjo-daro seem to have affinity to this text of Lothal. So these seem to have the usage pattern of these two sites was found to be quite similar, and then followed by Chanudaro, other Harappan sites. Harappa seems to have a distinct usage, and it was also interesting to note that West Asian sites were entirely different, which this was already noted by some of our earlier studies too. If we take a look at the similar plot for the object types, we find that now this here we have the type of object on the x-axis. So SL is seal, no, sorry, sealing, miniature tablet. Now this is ivory or bronze implement, seal, pottery graffiti, copper tablets. These are ivory or bone rods. These are bronze implements, and so on. So sealings and miniature tablets seems to have closer association in the terms of sign usage. Seals were found to be close to the pottery graffiti in terms of the sign usage, and this also seems is interesting as some of the precursors of the Indus writing can be found in the pottery graffiti as shown by the work by Professor Canoyer and so on. So to summarize, following can be said about the structure of Indus writing. The script has a rich syntax with an underlying logic in its structure. There is a significant asymmetry in the usage of text beginners and text enders. Machine learning techniques enable us to identify syntactically valid writing and restore damaged Indus text. The difference in the usage pattern of Indus signs on Indus seals excavated from West Asian sites suggests that the script may have been used to write West Asian content. The flexibility in usage of signs in Indus text falls within the range of linguistic systems. The design of Indus signs are intricate, and sign compounding seems to add value to basic signs rather than save writing space. The text can be optimally subdivided into 9 distinct clusters using unsupervised machine learning techniques, and the results do provide significant constraints to any model of decipherment and can be used to evaluate the same. Thank you.